Jason always believed that the life of a soldier was a journey of glory and patriotism. Growing up with stories of Revolution-era heroes, the 19-year-old from Pennsylvania thought war was the chance to prove himself. So when the Union Army called for volunteers, Jason signed up without hesitation. The day he boarded the train for the training camp, his mother held him for a long time. His father simply nodded, saying nothing. But Jason saw pride in his eyes. He thought to himself, just a few months and I'll be back a hero. But reality doesn't care about dreams. Jason's first night in the training camp outside Washington, D.C. was worse than anything he imagined. He didn't mind the cold, not at first. What unsettled him was the smell. A mixture of unwashed bodies, wood smoke, mildew, and something he later learned was the latrine trench. His bunk was a hard wooden plank with a thin layer of straw. He might as well have slept on stone. The other recruits in his tent came from all walks of life. Some were farm boys like him, others factory workers, and a few were immigrants who barely spoke English. But they all shared the same wide-eyed mix of pride and fear. One of them, a tall kid with a crooked grin, tossed him a piece of stale jerky. "Name's Eli," the boy said. "Looks like we're in for a hell of a ride." Jason would never forget Eli. Training began at 4 a.m. There were no bugles, no bells, just the thunderous roar of Sergeant Morgan on your feet. 5 minutes outside or I'll drag you. Jason scrambled up, head pounding. His boots, identical for left and right feet, scraped against yesterday's blisters. They marched through thick fog with rifles on their backs and mud sucking at their heels. Some recruits vomited during the first lap. Jason nearly did too. Morgan didn't laugh. "If you think Johnny Reb's gonna pity you, you better go home to your mama now." They drilled until their muscles shook. Rifles up, down, march, turn, form a line, aim, fire again and again. Jason's palms blistered. His feet bled. Meals were salt pork hardtack and coffee so bitter it could strip paint. But what wore him down most wasn't the pain. It was the fear in the tent each night, clinging to the air like smoke that never cleared. Eli quickly became Jason's closest friend. He was always laughing, always telling jokes. A former blacksmith, he was strong as an ox and somehow managed to lighten the mood, even in hell. "War isn't pretty, Jace," Eli said one night as they lay shoulder to shoulder staring at the canvas ceiling. "But if I gotta die out there, I hope I don't die alone." Jason didn't know what to say. He turned his head away and whispered a silent prayer. "Please, don't let Eli die." Training didn't get easier, it only got harder. The days blurred together into a grueling rhythm of aching muscles, freezing mornings, and shouted orders. But amid the hardship, something else grew a bond. Eli and Jason became inseparable. They were paired during most drills, which meant they learned to rely on each other fast. When Jason stumbled during bayonet practice, Eli yanked him back up. When Eli forgot a step during rifle loading, Jason whispered the count under his breath until Eli got it. They shared rations letters from home and crude jokes that made the misery slightly more bearable. At night, when others collapsed into exhausted silence, Eli and Jason would whisper stories about the lives they missed: Eli's little brother, who always got into trouble, Jason's family barn, and the apple tree he used to climb. One night, they snuck out past the tents and wandered to the edge of the woods. The moon lit the clearing with a cold, silver glow. "You know what I miss most," Eli said, sitting on a stump. Jason shook his head. "Clean clothes, a bed, and real food that doesn't squeak when you bite it." Jason laughed. "You mean the weevils? They're crunchy, Jace. That ain't normal." They sat there a long while, just listening to the wind through the trees. The next day, it rained. Not a soft drizzle, but a cold, relentless downpour that turned the camp into soup. They trained anyway. Sergeant Morgan's philosophy was simple. If the weather can kill you, it probably will. They spent hours digging trenches, setting up mock defenses, and crawling through mud. Eli slipped into a water-filled ditch and disappeared up to his chest. "Hell's bathwater," he shouted, coughing and laughing as Jason pulled him out. Later that night, When the others were asleep, Eli tossed Jason a damp bundle. "Found it in the supply wagon," he whispered. Jason unwrapped it. Inside was a mostly intact deck of playing cards and a half-used candle. "You're a criminal," Jason said, grinning. "I prefer resourceful," Eli replied. They played by candlelight until the wax burned out. Jason lost every hand. "You cheat," he muttered. Eli leaned back on his bedroll. "Nah, you're just easy to read." Jason smiled. For the first time in weeks, it felt almost like home. By the third week, they were running full drills with full packs. Marches stretched to 15 miles. Rifles grew heavier with every step, and boots tore open old wounds on their heels. Jason started developing a cough. Eli shared the last of his honey lozenges smuggled from a settler's cart. When Jason asked where he got them, Eli only winked. "You ask too many questions." Then came the rifle inspection. Morgan stormed through the ranks, barking criticisms. When he stopped in front of Jason, he pointed at the mud caked along the firing mechanism. "You planning to kill Rebs with that? Or just piss them off?" Before Jason could answer, Eli stepped forward. "That's on me, sir. We shared oilcloths, and I didn't dry his gear properly." Morgan glared, then moved on. "You didn't have to do that," Jason muttered. Eli shrugged. "We're a team, aren't we?" That night, Jason couldn't sleep. He kept staring at the canvas roof above him, wondering what he had done to deserve someone like Eli. "We're leaving soon," Eli said, breaking the silence. Jason nodded. Orders had come earlier that day. The regiment was to mobilize destination undisclosed. "You scared?" Eli asked. Jason paused. "Yeah, you." Eli smiled in the dark, terrified, but neither of them said more. They didn't have to. The bond was there, forged in sweat blisters and rain. They were no longer two boys from different corners of the country. They were brothers, and soon war would test that bond in the cruelest way possible. The march to the front was long and punishing. Mud sucked at their boots. Their rifles dug into sore shoulders. Every mile felt like 5. Rumors spread that they were heading to Virginia, where the real fighting was. By the time they arrived, the sky was gray with smoke. Cannon fire echoed through the hills. Jason's heart beat faster with every step, not from exertion, but from dread. "Welcome to hell," Eli muttered. Their unit was ordered to dig in behind a ridge. They worked through the night, shoveling earth, stacking logs, dragging artillery into place. No one slept. By dawn, the air was heavy with anticipation and the stench of damp sweat and powder. Then came the first blast. A Confederate shell screamed overhead and detonated 50 yards from their trench. Dirt rained down like a storm. Jason dropped to the ground, heart slamming into his ribs. "Positions," Sergeant Morgan bellowed. They scrambled, gripping rifles, peering into the haze. Then the second shell landed closer this time. Jason barely had time to react before the third came screaming in. It exploded just feet behind him. The blast threw him forward, his ears ringing, vision swimming in gray. He hit the mud hard, dazed, unable to move. The world was spinning. Sound faded. Everything seemed far away. But then hands. Strong hands. "Jason, Jason." Eli's voice cut through the ringing. Jason blinked. Blood filled his mouth. He tried to speak but couldn't. Eli crouched beside him, face pale, uniform, already stained red. "You're not dying here, you hear me?" A bullet whizzed overhead. Another shell exploded nearby. Eli didn't flinch. He hooked his arms under Jason's and dragged him back inch by inch across the cratered field. Shrapnel hissed through the air. Mud splashed. Somewhere someone screamed. Still, Eli didn't stop. They reached the trench. Eli dropped Jason gently behind a barricade. "Stay down. Don't move." Only then did Jason notice the blood running down Eli's cheek. A sharp fragment of metal had torn through the side of Eli's face, leaving a long, ragged gash from temple to jaw. Blood soaked his collar. Jason tried to sit up. Eli pressed him back down. "Shut up and breathe." Medics arrived minutes later. Jason's injuries were mostly bruises and a mild concussion. Eli refused treatment until Jason was bandaged. Later that night, after the firing subsided, they sat side by side in silence. Eli had a rough bandage over his cheek. The bleeding had stopped, but the wound would scar. Deeply. Jason looked at him, guilt gnawing at his gut. You should have left me. Eli didn't look back. Not a chance. But your face, Eli shrugged. I can still shoot. Can still eat. I'm not here to win beauty contests. Jason couldn't meet his eyes. In the smoke and chaos, he had frozen. And Eli, brave, reckless Eli, had paid the price. That night, Jason lay awake, reliving every second. The blast, the helplessness, the blood. A single question looped through his mind. Did I get my brother hurt? And though Eli never said it and never blamed him, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that somehow it was his fault. The next campaign didn't begin with a trumpet call. It began with the thunder of enemy artillery. After the shelling that nearly took Jason's life, both he and Eli were pulled back for a short rest. But war didn't offer long breaks. Just 2 days later, they returned to their unit, Eli with a bandage running down one side of his face, revealing the deep red scar from temple to jaw. Jason was still dizzy at times, but he held his rifle again. This time they were assigned to support an engineering company tasked with clearing a path through a small southern-held town. The terrain was tight, enemy ambushes expected, and hesitation would mean death. The night before the assault, Eli sat next to Jason, staring into the distance. This time no one's dragging you back, Eli said, half joking. So don't fall. Jason gave a quiet nod. The air between them no longer belonged to naive boys. It was the silent understanding of men who had already survived hell together. The battle began at dawn. Our artillery opened first, trying to soften resistance. But the moment infantry advanced, enemy fire answered like a hammer. Jason and Eli pushed forward with the vanguard, weaving through rubble and shattered buildings, inching their way into the heart of the town. Right side balcony, Eli shouted, yanking Jason behind a broken wall. One hand held his rifle, the other pinned Jason against the bricks. Jason gasped one more second, and the bullet might have taken his head. They've got a sniper, he muttered. Eli nodded. We split. I'll draw fire. You get to the roof. You'll have a clean shot. No, Jason snapped. You're the one already wounded. Let me go. Eli gave a half smile. Scar doesn't slow me down. Before Jason could argue, Eli broke cover, firing 3 quick rounds at the opposing building. Jason clenched his jaw and flanked along the wall, looping behind enemy lines. On the roof, Jason crawled over broken shingles. The air reeked of powder, blood, and ash. Below, Eli moved like a shadow. Jason raised his rifle, held his breath, and squeezed the trigger. The sniper on the balcony crumpled. At that moment, another artillery shell landed. A building just yards away exploded. Jason tumbled across the roof, crashing into a chimney. His vision swam, but he heard Eli shout, "Move now!" They took shelter in an abandoned storefront, hearts pounding, rifles shaking in their hands. You shoot better than last time, Eli panted with a grin. Jason chuckled weakly. This time I made sure no one had to pull me out. The fighting lasted until late afternoon. Dust clung to everything. Soldiers were no longer recognizable, just stumbling shadows in smoke and flame. Jason and Eli's unit held the left flank, covering the engineers as they set charges to clear the road. The two never left each other's side. When Jason's rifle jammed, Eli covered him. When Eli slipped on rubble, Jason hauled him up. They didn't need words. Every glance, every nod was part of a rhythm built on trust. When the gunfire finally eased and the smoke began to lift, they stood amid ruins, bloody, dusty, but alive. Eli slumped against a wall, wiping blood from his reopened wound. We didn't die this time, Jason said, sitting beside him. Eli smirked. Maybe I'm just too stubborn to die. Jason said nothing. In his head, the screams and gunfire still echoed, the broken bodies, the wet snap of shattered bone. What if we open a forge after this? Eli said, suddenly gazing at the sky. Jason turned surprised. Not a joke. I know smithing. You've got a brain. No more rifles. Just nails and horseshoes. Peace. Jason nodded. For a brief moment, the idea of a simple life lifted something heavy off his chest. We'll survive, Jason said. Yeah, Eli replied. At least, today. The next engagement came just days later. Their regiment was tasked with securing a crossroads critical to supply lines. The terrain was open, a sparse field hemmed in by thick woods and old stone walls, no cover worth the name. Jason had been on edge all morning. Maybe it was the strange quiet before the battle. Maybe it was the way Eli kept checking his rifle a little more often than usual. Or maybe it was because the air smelled like burning hay and wet iron, the scent of something waiting to die. Their orders were simple: advance with the second wave and take the ridge overlooking the supply route. Artillery had pounded the enemy position, but no one truly believed it was clear. As the signal came, they moved. The first wave charged. Gunfire erupted. Jason and Eli sprinted behind them, crouching low. Bullets whipped through the grass, snapping past their heads. The world became thunder and fire. Smoke thickened the air. Jason ducked behind a cart, heart hammering. He peeked to see Eli motioning from a few yards ahead. "Move," Eli shouted. Jason hesitated. He saw movement ahead, shadows along the tree line. He lifted his rifle, aimed, then second-guessed himself. Was it friendly? That moment of hesitation, less than 3 seconds, was everything. Eli thinking. Jason was right behind, dashed toward the wall ahead. But just as he reached the midpoint, a spray of bullets tore across the field. Jason looked up just in time to see Eli spin and fall. No. Jason broke cover, crawling forward on elbows and knees through the mud. Bullets chewed the earth around him. He reached Eli's side. Eli was alive, barely. A bullet had torn through his abdomen. Blood seeped quickly. His face was pale, eyes half-lidded. I can't feel my legs," Eli whispered. Jason grabbed his shoulders, trying to lift him, but panic made his hands clumsy. He looked back. The squad was pinned. No medic would reach them in time. "I'll get you out," Jason said. "Just hold on." But something in him cracked. He froze. In that split second, paralyzed by fear, by the image of Eli's blood on his hands, by guilt, Jason didn't move. He didn't drag, didn't scream, didn't shield. He just stared. And then came the shell. A Confederate mortar fell short 20 feet from them. Then 10. Then the last one. It landed almost on top of Eli. The blast flung Jason backward. He slammed into the earth, ears ringing, vision white. Smoke swallowed everything. When it cleared, Eli was gone. Jason crawled forward, numb. What remained wasn't a body. It wasn't even a person. Just pieces scattered and smoking. He didn't cry, not then. There wasn't time. They were ordered to fall back. Jason moved like a ghost, rifle in hand but eyes empty. No one asked about Eli. No one could. That night, by the dim flicker of a trench lantern, Jason stared at his bloodied hands. Eli's voice echoed in his skull. "This time no one's dragging you back." Jason had stayed on his feet, and Eli had died for it. He should have moved. He should have dragged Eli. He should have screamed for help. Instead, he'd hesitated, and it had cost everything. Jason didn't sleep. He couldn't. And when morning came, he wasn't the same man anymore. Jason never returned to battle the same. After Eli's death, he walked and fought like a shadow of himself, alive in body but hollow in spirit. Every sound on the field reminded him of that final scream, of the deafening blast of the last moment he saw his best friend. He couldn't pull the trigger. The next skirmish came 2 days later. A minor engagement routine, the officers called it. But when Jason found himself staring down the sights of his rifle, a Confederate soldier running toward their flank in clear view, his finger froze. He blinked. Suddenly it wasn't a stranger, it was Eli. The soldier fired first. Jason didn't feel the bullet enter his shoulder. Only the collapse. Only the dirt rushing up to meet him. He was dragged from the field by 2 men he barely remembered. They said he was lucky. Clean shot. Didn't hit bone. Would heal in weeks. But something else had broken. Jason was discharged for medical and psychological fatigue. Combat trauma, the doctor wrote. Severe mental distress. Unfit for continued service. He didn't argue. They gave him his pay, his papers, and a train ticket north. Home didn't feel like home. Jason's old room was too quiet. His bed too soft. The sound of children playing in the fields outside made him flinch. At night, Eli returned. Not in dreams. in flashes, the way he fell, the sound of his voice shaking. The moment Jason froze, the second too long, the mortar's whistle. Jason would wake with fists clenched, heart pounding, mouth dry. He'd sit by the window until dawn, watching shadows drift across the barn. After 2 weeks of silence, he boarded a train west. Destination Eli's hometown. He found the house easily. A modest farmhouse tucked beneath an old maple tree. A woman opened the door, Eli's mother. Her hair was tied back, streaks of gray above the ears. Her eyes found Jason's uniform and froze. I was with Eli, Jason managed. She didn't speak. She simply stepped aside. Inside, Eli's father sat on the edge of a wooden chair. He didn't rise. He just nodded once. Eli's younger brother peered out from the staircase, wide-eyed, silent. Jason told them everything. Not the official version. Not the glorified obituary the army had likely sent. The truth. The field, the bullets, the hesitation, the price. Eli's mother wept. Not loud, just a trembling hand to her face. Eli's father closed his eyes, said nothing for a long time. Then finally he spoke. He loved you, you know. Wrote about you more than he did about us. Jason choked. I failed him. No, the father said quietly. You were there. That's more than most ever are. Jason stood to leave. He couldn't stay. He didn't deserve their kindness. As he reached the door, Eli's mother caught his hand. You live, son, she whispered. Carry him forward. That's how you make it right. Years later, Jason still wakes at night. The mortar's whistle never fades. He works as a blacksmith, just like Eli had dreamed. His tools are worn, his hands scarred. Each horseshoe he shapes, each nail he drives, is a prayer. He never married, he never left the county. But every Sunday he walks to the small cemetery on the hill, places a new iron cross at Eli's grave, says nothing, just listens to the wind. Sometimes he feels peace, other times only silence. But he keeps living, and in that stubborn, trembling life, Eli endures. End.